Hey guys, welcome back. It's John here, also known as Unity 3D Coder. In this video, we're going to be covering object pooling. So what is object pooling? Object pooling is basically where you take a bunch of game objects, you put them in a pool, and you reuse them. Now, why is this efficient to use? In your games, and the most basic example I can think of is a space shooter game. Every time you shoot a laser beam or a laser, you are instantiating that object. Not only that, but every time you shoot something, you are destroying that object. You are constantly creating memory and you're causing cleanup for what's known as the garbage collection. The garbage collection is a C# feature that picks up unneeded memory and it basically clears up your cache so that you can move to the next frame. In games, you can't continue on to the next frame until the garbage collection is done. Every time you use the new keyword, you're creating new memory and the garbage collector has to come through and clean it out. Okay? So, anytime in a game that you experience lag or a drop in frame rate, it's typically because the garbage collection isn't done cleaning out your game. So, how do we reduce these new calls and how do we reduce destroying objects, which destroy the destroy function and the instantiate function? How do we avoid using them so we don't call the garbage collection? We do this through a design pattern known as object pooling. Basically, the idea behind it is that you spawn X amount right when the game starts and you reuse those objects. So for instance, you have a laser. Well, at the start of the game, spawn 20 of them, and then you constantly just reuse those 20 lasers. So that's what we're going to go ahead and create today. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to create that example. So the way I'm going to do it here is basically when I hit the space key, a laser is going to spawn in the center of the screen and it's just going to go up. Now, and it's going to destroy itself when it goes off the screen, but it's actually not going to destroy itself, and I'm actually not going to be creating any objects either. They're just going to be reusable, reusable objects. So, how do we do this, and what's the first step? The first step is we need to create the object pool. The object pool is a manager class, which means you only have one of them, and which also means if you watch the intermediate series, it can and should be a singleton manager. So we're going to create an object pool manager. So we're just going to name it we'll name it object pool, or maybe pool manager. So pool manager. And go ahead and put that on the main camera if you want. And actually, you know what? You don't even have to. Let's have a separate game object for it. And because we're using a singleton, we can lazy instantiate it. So I'll open up Mono Develop here. And if you're not familiar with what lazy instantiation is, or you forgot it, it means you don't need a physical object. It will be created when you first call this instance. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and zoom in here for you guys. All right, I hope that's enough. So we need to turn this into a singleton. Don't really care about void start, void update right now. I'll use it maybe later. So first thing we need to do, we need to say public pool, private. So private static pool manager underscore instance, because we need an instance for this class. And we want the memory to stay for the life of the game. That's why it's static. And then we need a property for it. So we're going to say here, public static pool manager. And if you're not sure what's going on here, guys, I have a video on a singleton managers that you can check out in the intermediate series. It's very useful, very performance friendly. All right, and what we're going to do when you call that instance is if we're going to check and see if the instance is null. And if it is, we need to return it. So if instance equals null, then we need to go ahead and create the instance. So we're going to say here, game object. I don't know why my tooltip went away. Figure that out in a second. And we're going to name this pool manager. Alright, so let's see here. If the instance is null, game object go equals new game object manager. And let me just see, I have an error somewhere. I don't see it though. Let me go to Unity. A get. Oh, yes, of course. Okay, when you're creating a property, you need a get accessor. So when I get, I'm going to check if it's null. If it is, I'm going to go ahead and create the object. And then once I create it, I need to add a component, which is the pool manager. And if it's not null, I just need to return the instance. Alrighty, and we're almost done. Void awake. We need to assign the instance. So we say underscore instance equals this. Alrighty, our singleton design is finished for our pool manager. Now we need to actually make it work. So for instance, for this example, and your pool manager can have 100 different types of objects. It doesn't have to be specific to one thing. For instance, if I had enemies, if I had enemies, if I had bullets, if I had asteroids, I could put them all into one pool manager. That's okay. And we're going to get into how to tidy it up when we start instantiating a lot of them in the beginning. So what I'm going to do here is in void start, we need to decide how many objects do we want. You don't want to spawn you don't want to make it to where you don't spawn enough, because once all the objects are active, you're out of objects. So you want to make sure that your player has a guaranteed amount that he's going to be able to reuse. And it's okay that you use this memory at start, because once it's there, it's done. You don't have to worry about it. You're not making any new calls to the garbage collection, and you're saving on performance. So let's say I want to spawn 20 bullets. I want to spawn 20 bullets at the start, and I want to reuse those 20 bullets for the rest of my game. Instead of instantiating new ones and destroying them, I'm going to reuse the same 20. In order to do that, I need to first know about the game object I'm going to spawn. So we need a public game object, and we're going to say here, we'll say bullet. So we'll say bullet fab for prefab. Alright, so let's go ahead and create that. Alright, we're going to go ahead here in the scene and just create a capsule for our bullet. Alright, so that's going to be our bullet. And let's go ahead and create a prefab of it. Alright, and on our main camera, okay, so actually now we have a problem. I can't add this because the object doesn't exist. So now I actually need to create the object, which means our null checking will never get called because the object already exists, which is okay, that's good. So let's go and create here, pool manager. If the pool manager object doesn't exist, it will be created. So that's good. Alright, so here we go, we have our bullet prefab. Alright, let me rename this to bullet. Rename it to bullet. Alrighty, so you go in here, we're going to put the bullet in there. So now we know what object we're going to spawn. Now what we can do is we can create a variable for how many do we want to spawn. So how many do I want to spawn? I want to spawn 20 in the beginning. So what I can do here is let's create a variable for it. So we're going to say here, public int bullets to spawn. So we're going to say bullets to spawn equals 20. Alright, so we're going to spawn 20. Now what I'm going to do here is using a for loop, I'm going to spawn 20 bullets. So I'm going to say for, and then for int I equals 0, while I is less than bullets to spawn, right? So that's going to be 20. And then I++, what do we want to do? We need to create, we need to spawn a new game object. So we're going to say here, game object bullet equals a new, I'm sorry, not equals a new, instantiate, and then the object we want to spawn. So I'm going to say here, bullet fab, this position is going to be 0, 0, 0. So I'm just going to say here, vector3.0. And then I don't really care about the rotation, so we're going to say quaternion.identity. And what's going to happen now is we're going to spawn 20 items. So check this out. Got an error here. Oh, okay. That's a good error to see. So what I'm getting here, it says unityengine.object to unityengine.gameObject. And what it's asking for, it says an explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? A typecast allows you to basically declare something as whatever you're meant for it to be. There's a few ways you can cast an item. So for instance, we're spawning a game object here. So I could just say right here, I could say game object. But I really don't like this way, and I only ever use this way on primitive types. Like I never use Unity things for a cast like that. For Unity, I always use as and then the cast, which is game object. For things like floats, ints, and stuff like that, I'll use the cast I just showed you. But basically, if you ever get that error, it just means you just need to add as game object. This right here needs to match this. So if this was a transform bullets, it needs to be as transform. But because I'm working with game object, I'm using as game object. So pretty simple. All right, so let's go and test this out, see what happens. So if we go ahead and run this, you'll see here 20 bullets were created. Now, before we get into how to reuse these objects, it looks like shit in my hierarchy. I want to clean it up. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. I want to make it a child of the pool manager. So how can I do that? Well, what we can do here is after spawning them, you can grab the bullet you just spawned, you can grab its transform, you can grab its parent and assign it to this transform, which is the object pool. So when we do that, all those items are going to be now parented inside of the pool manager. See that? Now, what happens if I have asteroids? Everything's going to be it's going to be like a list of 100 items. Let's take it even further. Let's go ahead and clean it up some more. So what can we do? How can we do that? Well, it's really simple actually. Let's go ahead and create a bullet container. So I'm going to create an empty object in here and I'm going to name it bullet container. And what I'm going to do now is I need to create a variable that's going to hold that container. So I'm going to say right under here, I'm going to say public game object. We'll say bullet container. All right. And what we're going to do now is instead of saying this.transform, we're going to say the parent is the bullet container.transform. And now all 20 of bullets will be spawned inside of the bullet container. And actually we have a null reference because I never assigned it in the inspector. So bullet container goes here. And now when I run it, check that out. Here's our pool manager, our bullets, and there you go. So now we can have our bullets and enemies and anything else you want. That's how easy it is to organize your pool. So how do we actually make use of this now? So after spawning them, we don't want the objects to be visible, because watch what happens actually. You'll notice here, and let me go ahead and remove this bullet here, is at start we're spawning all the bullets, and you'll see that they're visible. All 20 of them are visible. Well, when you create the pool, you want them to be turned off. So after parenting them, you need to grab them again. You need to grab them again, and you need to say here bullet.transform dot set active. Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually just bullet. It's bullet.set active, and we want to say false. Alright. Now, there's one more thing we need to do here. I created all these bullets, but how do I know that they can be used, or how do I access all of them? I need to somehow gain access now to all these bullets. They're all inside the bullet container, which is great. However, I can't access them. So for every bullet I create, I need to store them in a list that I can then iterate through in my other scripts. So for instance, if you're creating a space shooter, your player needs to be able to check a list of your bullets to see if there's any active bullets available, or if there's any objects in the pool that he can reuse. Okay? So give me just 1 second here. Alright, so what we have here now is a system that spawns the bullets. However, all it's doing right now is just neatly spawning them in this bullet container so that it's cleaner for us to continue developing, cleaner for us to view our game and stuff like that. It's not actually doing anything. In order for this to work, we also need a list of bullets. So for instance, every bullet we create, we need to add it to a list that we can then access and check for active objects. So in order to do that, we need a game object list. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create right here, we're going to say here a public list. And before I can use a list, if you're familiar, if you're not familiar, go ahead and check out the advanced series on list. And you need to use system.collections.generic. That's going to give you access to the list library. So I'm going to create a game object list. Alright, and what it's going to be is it's going to be bullets. So we're going to say here equals a new list of type game object, and then initialize it. So now we have a bullets list. So every object you spawn, you want to turn it off, and then you want to add it to this list. So here we're going to say bullets, which is the list. And actually, you know what? For naming conventions, I'm going to name this, we're going to name it bullet list. It's bullets list, right? Bullets list. No, we're going to name it bullet list. Alright, so we got our bullet list, and what I'm going to do here is for every object we spawn, we're going to say bullet list dot add, and we're going to add the current bullet we just created. So check out what's going to happen now when we run it. Alright, so we created 20 items. They're a parent of the bullet container. They're all turned off because we told them to be. But now also, if you check on the pool manager here, check this out. We have a public bullets list here. And that list contains all of the game objects that we can now have access to and spawn them. whenever we want to. So check this out. So let's go ahead and create a new script here. So every time I hit space, I want to reuse those objects. So I'm going to say here, we're going to say space key pressed. Alright, that's going to go on the main camera. Alright, so just to set it up, basically all we need to do is just check if we hit the space key. So if input.getKeyDown, keycode.space, and then what's the logic here? So what are we checking for? We need to check that list. So check the pool list. Check the pool list to see if any items are inactive. We only want the inactive ones. If they're active, we don't want to touch those because there's a good chance they might be seen by the player. So you don't want to reuse an active object. It might already be doing something. We want to reuse an inactive object. So we need to check the pool to see if there's any inactive objects. And if there is, we need to say setActive true. And then when setActive is true, there's a function called onEnable, which will automatically get called. We need to declare that function, but it's a Unity thing. It automatically gets called, and it's going to allow us to create the behavior for our bullets. Okay, so here's how easy this is. We have a singleton manager for our object pool, so we need to check the list to see if any items are inactive. Before we can do that, we have 20 items. So how do I iterate through all those items? We need another for loop. So here we're going to say for int I equals 0, while I is less than the pool manager dot instance, and then what do we want? We want the bullets container, right? Or I'm sorry, not the container. We want the bullets list. So and then we want the count. So while I is less than 20, basically, we're going to increment I, and we're going to check to see if the current bullet is setActive or not. And the way you do that is through a function called isActiveInHierarchy. So we're going to say here, if poolManager.instance.bulletList, and then I.isActiveInHierarchy, so it's a bool that returns true or false, and we're checking for false. If it's false, we want to say, grab that object, so poolManager.instance.bulletList, grab the current bullet that we're on, and you're going to say here dot setActive true. Now, after you're done, if we just run this, what's going to happen is it's going to go through every single bullet and turn them all true. We only want it to happen once. So the way we have to do this is we have to use the keyword break, and that's going to allow you to get out of the loop. Okay, so when you use the break keyword in a loop, it just ends right away. So instead of turning all 20 bullets on, it's going to turn this bullet on, and then it's going to break out of the loop, and until we hit space again, the loop won't get called. So it's pretty simple, pretty easy. If you're not familiar with for loops, make sure you watch the fundamental series. So we're running a bit short on time here, so I want to go ahead and try and speed this up a bit. Let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll check out what happens, and actually we should probably create a behavior script for our bullet, and we'll do that real quick. Just name it behavior, put it on the bullet. Now, every time a bullet is turned on, this function is going to get called automatically from Unity. It's called onEnable. It's actually called before start. It's called whenever you turn on a game object. It doesn't matter if you turn it off and then on, or have it on and turn it off then back on. onEnable is always called every time the game object becomes active. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say here, onEnable, we're going to say, and actually, no, we don't really have to do anything there, I don't think. But it's good to be able to initialize things. Like if you have variables you want to set or something like that, you set them there. And what I'm going to do here is we're just going to say transform.translate. And then we're just going to say vector3.up times time.delta times 10. So it just moves up. Now, when it comes to reusing these objects, we need to turn this object off. The way we do that is through a function called onDisable. So, when onDisable is called, this function needs to add the item, it needs to just turn the item off. So the way you do that is you literally just say, and here I'm sorry, it's void onDisable, is you literally just say this.gameObject.setActive false, and then it will automatically go back into the pool to be reused later. Pretty cool. So what we're going to do here, let's go ahead and test this out. So right now, all our bullets are turned off. You can see that right here. They're all turned off. Now, as soon as I start hitting space, they fly up, and you'll see in the inspector, they're getting darker. They become active as I hit space. Now, what we want to do now is we need to make them go inactive. So let's add logic. Like once they get onto the 10 for the y-axis, they we'll say they turn off. All right. And the way we do that here is we're just going to say, I don't know if I can call the onDisable function like that. I might be able to do that. We'll say, there, basically we just want to check if it goes above the y. So we're going to say here, if input.getKey down, I'm sorry, not input.getKey. We're going to say if transform.position.y is greater than 10, then we want to call onDisable. All right, and that's going to basically just turn the objects off. So check this out. I'm going to go ahead and just spawn one. It's highlighted, and then it just went off. So it gets re-added to the list. So if I spawn 100 of them, or as many as I can, you'll notice, actually, oops. All right, there you go. And actually, we may have encountered an issue. It's not spawning them actually anymore. Wonderful. Let's find out why. Okay, let me spawn 3 that time. Why is it stopping? Let me see here. Update. If transform.position.y is greater than 10, onDisable. Okay, space key pressed. If we hit the space key down, we activate an object. Here's our pool manager doing all that good stuff. Why would it let me do 3 objects? That doesn't make sense. I can't do any. Something has to be wrong with the logic. Let's see here. I'm gonna let you guys watch me debug this. It says here transform.translate. That should be okay. If the position.y is greater than 10, call onDisable. I don't think that's an issue. This is also a Unity function, guys. It's automatically called when a game object gets set to false. So I might not even need it. Let's just try doing this in here. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Did I add the behavior script to the prefab? I did. Do they have it? Yeah. Alright, let's try this again. Okay, weird. It's not really letting me spawn them anymore. Alright, so in order to debug this, I have to create some debugs now. So let's go into our space key pressed here. And basically, I need to know how many times I hit space key. So I'm going to say debug.log space key pressed. And then here, right before we break, I need to know that we actually set one active. Object active. So if I hit the space key 5 times, 5 objects should go active. So space key pressed, object active. Space key pressed, object active. Oh, that's a problem. Check that out. Now the question is, why is that happening? And something tells me, what is wrong? Let's see, where am I instantiating them? I'm saying them active. Oh, you know what? I wonder if, I don't know how this is possible. I think they're getting spawned off the screen possibly somewhere. What I can do here is I say if pool manager instance bullet list.setActive is true, I turn the object active, and then I go ahead and here I'm going to say pool manager .instance .bullet list, grab the current one, I'm going to grab its transform, its position, I'm going to set it to vector3.0. I think because the objects are a child of a child, they're getting like weirdly positioned possibly. So let's see here. Alrighty, that was it. Bam! And there we go. So now we have our object pool, and you'll see I can never get to using 20 items. So I could probably even make this a 10 object pool, and it would be even better. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or concerns, comments, or case uses for this, let me know in the comments. Make sure you're following on my Facebook page at facebook.com/digitalgaminginstitute. Go to digitalgaminginstitute.com. I got some awesome stuff in the works. And yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe.